Here we are back for another 8th grade social studies lecture here. This one entitled A New Way to Do Business. Presuming there was an old way to do business. Before the railroad boom, nearly every American town had its own small factory. They produced goods for people in the immediate area, just right around, within several miles. By the late 1800s, however, big factories were producing goods more cheaply than small factories could. Railroads distributed these goods to nationwide markets, and as a result of that, the local small factories went out of business. So because there weren't any small factories, big businesses then increased their output. Now, because of this, big factories started to need more money. They had to buy raw materials, they had to pay their workers, they had to cover shipping and advertising costs. And in order to raise this money, or as we say, capital, Americans had to adopt a new way of doing business. So, the new way, many businesses expanded into what is called a corporation. A corporation is a business that is owned by several or many investors. The corporation sells something called a stock, which is a share of a business. And they sell them to the investors or the corporation. They are known as stockholders. The corporation can use the money invested by stockholders to build a new factory or buy new machines or hire new employees. In return for their investment, then, stockholders hope to receive something called dividends, which is a share of the corporation's profit. After the Civil War, corporations attracted a lot of money from American investors. They borrowed millions of dollars also from banks, so banks were making a whole bunch of bucks. The most powerful banker in the late 1800s was J.P. Morgan, J. Pierpont Morgan. Hey, nice mustache, huh? He gained control also of a lot of corporations because he invested money in them. Morgan and bankers invested in the stock of troubled companies. As large stockholders, they could win seats on the board of directors so that they could make and change the policies of the companies. So what they did is they reduced competition and ensured big profits. Between 1894 and 1898, Morgan gained control of most of the nation's major rail lines. He then started to buy up steel companies, including Carnegie Steel, which merged with another large corporation. So by 1901, when we learned in the last lecture that Carnegie sold his steel company, J.P. Morgan became the head of a company known as United States Steel Company, or U.S. Steel, which was America's first business that was worth more than $1 billion. What are these things? Anybody know? Well, they're called derricks. They're not Derek Breezies. They are oil derricks. And this fine-looking gentleman is John D. Rockefeller. Industry couldn't have expanded so quickly in the United States without all of the rich supply of natural resources. You had iron, you had minerals such as gold, silver, and copper, but a new resource was discovered up in Demdar Hills. Black gold, oil. The first oil strike was in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Hundreds of prospectors rushed out to Pennsylvania to drill for oil, and you can see in this picture that there are oil wells all over the place. Among those who came was young John D. Rockefeller. He didn't rush to drill for oil because he knew that oil had little value until it was refined or purified to make kerosene. Kerosene, because we didn't have a lot of cars, kerosene was used in the fuel as the fuel in stoves and lamps. So what Rockefeller did was he built an oil refinery. Rockefeller thought that competition was wasteful. He just thought that he should buy up all the other refineries, combine them into one, and that's what he did. He created the Standard Oil Company. Now, Rockefeller was a very shrewd businessman. He was always trying to improve the quality of his oil, so he did whatever he needed to do to get rid of the competition. The Standard Oil slashed its prices so low that smaller oil companies couldn't compete, and they were having to sell their oil for such low prices that they were driven out of business. Rockefeller also talked railroad companies into giving him lower shipping costs so that he would have an advantage too. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 95% of American oil refining. Standard Oil Trust. Whoops. A trust is a corporation run by a single board of directors. To tighten the hold over the oil industry, Rockefeller formed the Standard Oil Trust. Stockholders in dozens of smaller oil companies turned over their stock to Standard Oil. They got stock in a newly created trust. The trust paid the stockholders really, really high dividends. And the board of Standard Oil, which was headed by Rockefeller, managed all the companies that had previously been rivals. By doing this, Standard Oil created what we know as a monopoly of the oil industry. A monopoly controls all or nearly all of the business of an industry. And Standard Oil, as we said, controlled 95%. The other businesses followed Rockefeller's leads. They set up trusts to build monopolies, and now in this day and age, monopolies are illegal. In fact, Bill Gates was accused of running a monopoly with Microsoft and with Windows, and they were bundling Windows with certain computer companies, and you couldn't buy those certain programs without buying a certain type of computer. Okay, so people said that that the leaders of these giant corporations were abusing what we call the free enterprise system. In the United States, businesses can be owned by private citizens. Owners decide what products to make, how much to produce, where to sell products, and what prices to charge. So companies compete with other companies to win their customers over by having the best price. So critics said that trusts and monopolies reduced this competition, and that without competition, you couldn't keep the prices low, and you couldn't have really high quality products. And it was also really hard to get new companies to compete with these powerful trusts. They were also upset with the political corruption that was involved with this. There was a great deal of political influence, business people buying favors from elected officials. Under the pressure from the public, Congress came up with the Sherman Antitrust Act, and that banned the formation of trusts and monopolies. The only problem with this is that it was too weak to be effective. Some state governments passed laws to regulate business, but the corporations usually sidestepped them. Now, there were some people who said that trusts were a good thing. Andrew Carnegie published articles saying that too much competition ruined businesses and put people out of work. Defenders of big business argued that the growth of giant corporations brought around lower production costs, lower prices, higher wages, and a better quality of life for millions of Americans. They said that, if this weren't true, America by the year 1900 was enjoying the highest standard of living in the entire world. I hope you have enjoyed this business lecture, and I will see you soon.